This is Elon from the Egard podcast. It's been a little while since I've had on guests, so I'm very excited today. I have Dominick Izzo. I'll just give a quick introduction of who you are. Dominick is a great martial artist, has a big background in numerous styles. Wing Chun is his passion right now, but more importantly, he's also was a police officer for many years. And we've had many discussions, and I thought it would be really interesting to bring you on just because of the recent situation that occurred with that kid who was eating in his car, and then the police officer came over. I'll cut to a little bit of footage of it right here so people can see what we're talking about. So I don't know if you want to give a quick intro about yourself and your background, and then we could jump into that conversation.
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's good to talk to you. I'm a retired police officer from the northwest suburbs of Illinois. I know whenever somebody says suburb cop, they're always like, oh, you really don't do much. We got all the garbage that Chicago and Milwaukee chased out. And there was a cop from 2001 till 2019, defensive tactics instructor, use of force instructor, FTO, NIPUS Mobile Field Force, street cop. I've done my job. I love it. Wing Chun, student and teacher for the last 25 years, a wrestler. I love the combative arts and whatnot. And I do a bunch of other things, but that's in this spectrum. That's where my level of focus and expertise lie.
Amazing. That sounds pretty high level of expertise, if you don't mind me saying.
Well, I got more. I ran for sheriff. I wrote a book on being a cop, all that stuff. So yeah, that's all right.
Well, we've been, my brand has been very supportive of police. And one of the main things I like to say is that you cannot generalize the whole based on the actions of the few. And I think it's always important also within that to highlight when there's something bad that takes place, and to give police officers and retired police officers and people in that industry a chance to speak out and show that they don't agree with it. So that's part of the reason I have you on here, and also to look at solutions, like realistic solutions, because I thought what happened was pretty tragic. So I just want your thoughts on what took place as someone with your level of understanding, and then we could just go from there.
Yeah, generalize in that particular instance. And I just talked about it for the first time the other day. I like taking things from the perspective of both retired cop and public based on the information that's given. In other words, if all we got was a 60-second video, I don't like to give my criticism on what happened before because we don't know just yet. And I don't want to give my aftermath criticism on aftermath. I want to take it the same way the public does. And then obviously as time goes on, we look at it. I also don't like to lick boots. I'm extremely critical of police officers, 100%. I cannot stand on police forums the blue line supporters that arbitrarily, like I loathe that I have contempt for it when people wind up seeing a use of force circumstance and they say, well, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. I'm not going to lie. Anytime that a civilian goes through something without due process and the public just blindly supports the police, I hope I hope a family member of theirs goes through the exact same thing so they can understand the concept of police being servants, because that's what they are. Their job is to keep the peace and maintain order in a free society. That's it. They're not judge, they're not jury, they're not executioner. We got a long way away from that. That being said, that shooting was a bad shoot, horrible shoot. I looked at it. I'm technically a bunch of things that were wrong, right? He's basing the probable cause or reasonable suspicion on the stop for a car that ran from him a couple days ago. Again, remember, this is the information we were given in that 1 minute body camera footage video, right? Don't know if there was a warrant out for the driver. I commented in a video that I did, how the heck could he see who the driver was? It was 10:45 at night. It was low light conditions. It was parking lot. He calls for another unit, doesn't wait for another unit, goes up, opens the door, gives a command. That's an immediate seizure. And I could look at it from either way too. From a cop's point of view, I was looking at it as, why did he approach driver's side? Why didn't he approach passenger side? Why didn't he wait for backup? Why didn't he use a flashlight? But then again, too, he could have used the flashlight to avoid using it for, tactical purposes to get up. You open up the door, you're in a safe angle. So you're behind the driver, which then puts me in the citizen's point of view. You have no idea when somebody just opens up your door, who the hell they are behind you, says, get out of your car. And then he starts shooting at a fleeing vehicle, which is massively against department policies across the nation. It was just a bad shoot start to finish. That's where we could generalize at that. And I'll go into anything you want, but I saw that. And I think that the end result was good. That cop should have been fired 100%. He was in probationary period. I guess it sounds like he was a year. So I mean, most probation is about 18 months. And prosecuting, if they prosecute him, I'm 100% on board with that one too. He should have known a lot better.
Well, they are looking to prosecute him. I know that much. And if the kid who he shot dies, I know they want to go after him for murder charges. Um, which in this case, I mean, just based on the footage, again, it's very hard to know what happened before, what happened after. But just rationalizing it. There's a kid eating in his car who looked completely shocked when the police officer opened the door and did not know of it. It just in the immediate impression I got is that that kid did not know that a police officer was approaching the car, did not know who opened the door, and panicked.
100%.
And it was immediately shot after that. And you know, we talk about self-defense a lot. We're both in that world. When you have like adrenaline response or adrenal stress response, your mind is not working correctly a lot of the time, and you react without thought process. It's an immediate reaction. So I feel like in these situations, it's interesting because what do you feel the solution is to prevent situations like this from happening again in the future?
On a generalized scale, your candidates have to get better. People don't realize how horrible these new cops are that come out. I've been speaking about this for years. I think the minimal age to enter into law enforcement is 30 years old. Today's 21-year-old is nothing like 21-year-olds 30, 40 years ago. You know, it blows me away. My grandparents are World War II era. You know, my grandfather went into World War II at like 17, 18 years old, comes out as a family. 21-year-old boys today were men back then. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we're in our 40s. I don't want a 21-year-old boy showing up at my door because the neighbors heard my TV too loud. And so they thought a domestic was going on. 21-year-old kid shows up, and I know what his authority is to investigate. I know how their mindset is too. One of the worst things that ever happened for law enforcement was college. They required 60 hours or a 4-year degree. You got these men and women who went through book learning, no logic, no street smarts, and no interpersonal skills with other human beings. I never went to college. I was a friggin' bartender. So I had social skills, right? My money was based on how I took care of you. And even if you were a jag off at the bar, I still needed you to tip me, right? So I played the game. So I was great at sales, right? So what's the job of a cop, right? It's in certain circumstances, it's to get somebody in handcuffs. Wouldn't you rather have somebody who knows how to talk somebody into handcuffs? So one of the biggest things I was very proud of is, yeah, I was great at fighting and combatives and defensive tactics, but nobody could talk people into handcuffs better than I could. It's a skill set, right? So you have to have more car salesmen, bartender, retail, restaurant people in law enforcement. That's the first place I would go because that's hospitality. And then the second thing is a 21-year-old has no idea what it's like to struggle in the real world, struggle what it's like to pay their bills, worry about their mortgage, worry about their car payment, worry about their kids. You need people who are going to go up on scene and understand empathy and then apply that into the fast, rapidly evolving, tense, free-flowing situation that defensive tactics and use of force lies into. So we have to, it's not better training. You can't train people into life experience, right? So that's the number one thing is I think you need to increase the age of candidates coming out in the street because this is a bad problem.
That's very interesting. I've never heard that before, especially your approach of like, you need the real world experience of just dealing with people, not on paper, you know, not in college, but actually being out there, whether that is being a bartender, whether that is, you know, being a hostess or a host or whatever that thing is that gets you interacting with people because you learn human behavior that way. Very, very interesting approach that I really haven't heard from anyone we've interviewed before. Do you think that the atmosphere right now toward police, the way it's become more and more and more and more negative over the years, has impacted the people who apply for the job and contributes to the kind of issues that we may see sometimes? Because in my personal experience, a lot of good cops I know have become so, I guess I don't want to say depressed or like disenchanted with the job and everything like that, that they're just walking away from it much earlier than they have in the past. They're retiring much earlier. And those are the cops I want to see on the street. And so who's taking their place? Because we just keep putting down police. We keep calling them white supremacists. We keep saying they're killing everyone, which is statistically completely untrue. We do have these bad situations that occur, but again, they're used to generalize all police officers, which I find is somewhat contributing to the problem of more negative people coming into the force.
My department, I wound up going through a big to-do, right? I wrote about it in my book. I tell a story where I was involved in a federal lawsuit. They fired me for a department policy violation after 9 months of searching for something. I fought for 3 years, got reinstated, and then retired. To replace me, they hired 3 children. And I saw it on social media, the picture of these kids. Literally, they looked like they were playing Halloween, right? Two young men who didn't even look old enough to shave, uniforms disheveled, crooked tie bars, tilted hat like it's Frank Sinatra in 1950s, and a female. Now I'm torn. I just did another content on women being cops the other day, because not all men make great cops, right? But this woman had to be 5 foot whatever and 100 and something pounds. And the problem is, and I'm very vocal about, like, with my department, what they went through. My department was very short staffed, and I would hear all these updates from guys who worked on the department, other departments, or with the dispatching center, would tell me, yeah, these people were released on the street like 6 weeks earlier than they were supposed to be because they were short staffed. And what that created was Nazis on the street, right? You're looking at the older generation who is being forced out. Like, I was forced out because we don't play games. When you get to year 5, you start thinking, why the hell am I doing this job? You start seeing that not everybody is an asshole. Not everybody's a criminal. Yeah, you're going to get your repeat offenders. The bag of weed that you got on somebody, man, you don't need to arrest them for. But the problem is, now the department's got a performance evaluation, a quota. So you got to do this job. You get your paperwork kicked back to you 20 times. You get put into the crappy squad car because you pissed off the sergeant, and the sergeant's got a wife at home who's nagging on him, so he takes it out on you. I can't articulate what cops go through on a daily basis by their command staff. The command staff is the root of all problems in law enforcement. The pressure they put onto the cops don't want to take anymore. They work with idiot newbies on the street. So yeah, you're going to see people leaving. And then you got what? Still television shows today glorifying what the job is, and it isn't. So you get all these new hotheads coming in, thinking the job's going to be the Wild West. They take their shit out on people on the street. You get bad relationships. It's cyclical. It has always happened and always will happen.
Yeah, it's a real shame that there's been such a breakdown between communities and law enforcement, I find. My solution was always, number one, I feel like there's a huge amount of police officers who have PTSD and it's not dealt with. And it was widely ignored for many years. It's finally starting to get attention. You get a guy like this who, what happened with that kid, that's a guy who, I don't think the police officer came into the situation that day hoping to shoot somebody and hoping for all this to happen. I think that he just didn't know. The guy's just not equipped to deal with those kind of situations, right?
Too young. What you saw was he had a hard on for the car. That's a car that ran from me the other day. He says that over the air, right? I've been in those circumstances. Anytime somebody flees from you, you get the badge and a gun, right? And the lawful authority to take away someone's life or freedom on a daily basis if the situation warrants it. Do you have any idea how unbelievably intoxicating the power is if I tell you, sir, put your hands behind your back, and I have every right to do it, and you tell me, no, you and I are at war right now, and on the street, I will always win because I got the law behind me and I got numbers. All it takes is me for to key up, and every car from every area is going to come and bail me out one-on-one, right? I got the odds in my favor. I will always win. Aftermath, and based on my report, based on the courts, everything else, we don't know. But on that moment, I will win. You have no idea how addicting the power is of seeing that. Being on midnights in summertime and somebody calls for backup and a sea of us all show up and those blue lights are flashing and you all got your brethren around and you're just looking for a fight because you've been sitting in your squad car for 8, 10, 12 hours that night. It is an addiction and a rush. So when you take a new guy out in the academy, put him on the street, and he's got that, I'm the police, you ran from me. I'll tell you firsthand, it's an addiction and it's a rush. And what he probably did was, oh, I got this. He showed it by opening up that door. There's a million and one different ways of handling that. A more mature, older officer Izzo would have tapped on the window. Hey, did you run for me the other day? Well, what are you eating? You got a burger in there? All right, hey, do me a favor. I got a call for another car, but listen, I'm sure you had something happen to you the other day. Take the key out of the ignition. I just got to talk to you. You're all good. I'm going to get you out of here in about 5 minutes if you're all good, but I got to make sure you're not the guy who ran from me the other day. There's so many different ways of handling that. you saw a child approach that with a attitude of, oh, I'm the boss here. I won this game. It's a hard on for the job. And I felt that when I watched the video, because that's how I was my first year. That's how I was, even as a 26-year-old kid.
Well, I know myself at 21, I was, very wild, full of testosterone. It's very hard for a 21-year-old male to control themselves. And like you said, we don't have the real world experience yet, but we do feel invulnerable. We do, like, as a man, that brotherhood, even if you don't have it in law enforcement, if you just have your group of friends and you go out and you're prowling the street, you're like in a little group. It's the same feeling, I can imagine, just amplified by 1,000. So
by a badge in your back pocket. It's insane. It's unbelievable.
So it makes total sense that the maturity, I'm sure there's some 21-year-old police officers who are entering the force who are mature, who grew up in a family that kind of raised them right to be that way. But I could see that totally contributing to the problem, because you're right. By 26, I was still a little bit. By 30 is when I started calming down and kind of understanding the world. And I would imagine we're getting older faster nowadays, in the sense that we're like able to use computers younger and all this stuff, but we're also less mature. We go through less hardships than we used to go through. So you look at, like you said, people in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, what they had to do by the age of 21, and their lifespan was shorter, is so vastly different than how we're raised. By 21, you're a baby today. Back then, you were a man. So, yeah, super, super interesting. I don't really have any type of any type of criticism on your approach to how you view things. I do, again, think that if we had more positive language toward police, I just feel like there's been a major degradation in terms of how we perceive police, which makes me fearful for the future, because, again, number one, less good police officers are entering the force. They're short-staffed, there's higher stress, and that kind of community policing sense of, hey, you could talk to someone. When you believe that everyone out there sees you as the enemy, you're probably more on alert too, right? So I believe that that's probably happened over the past 5 to 10 years with police officers also, as this narrative has gotten stronger and stronger and stronger, that all police officers are dangerous. And we see that a lot, that they're probably more on guard of who they're approaching also, because they perceive you as more of a threat too.
Yeah, think about it. What's it going to do to you? Your job is to sit inside of a car for your entire shift. It's like in a tiny box, and most towns are one person cars, right? The two cars, that's like LA, Chicago, New York. That's about it, right? Now you got a personal life. Maybe you argued with your wife that day before you went to work, because some women really know how to press the issue, because they got to get the last word, because maybe they're tired of you playing cop at home. Your kids are really screwing with your head. You go to work and now you're stuck in that box all day long with nothing to do but think. Now your command staff goes through the same thing. Guy's got stars and bars, stripes, clovers at work, but at home, he's not the boss. The wife is. He's going to take his shit out on you. You're going to be festering in your car with pressure from command staff, pressure from your wife, pressure from the people on the street. You don't think that all that pressure is going to make some cops snap when they can? I'm going to tell you, it blows me away. Because I Said So was such a powerful tool. I don't have kids. I'm not married, right? But for me to go on the street and tell a grown man, because I said so, and watch the life get sucked out of them because they knew they had two choices, resist or comply, it's 100% addictive. There's nothing more powerful than a 911 call, going into a grown man or woman's home. They're older than you. It's their home, this and that. And you're like, sit on the couch. This house is mine until the investigation's over. That's unbelievable power. To seize, to literally stop somebody from moving forward, car, walking down the street, in their home, to seize them and say, you're mine. That's power. And they have them listen to you. And it is so addicting. It's ridiculous. Problem is the more that we have these narratives of cops are all racist and this and that. We went through younger generation. I was talking to my sister a couple of weeks ago about this, where used to be in the 80s. Somebody called you a racist, you're like, oh my God, no, I'm not a racist. And you like defended yourself over and over again. Say today somebody calls you racist, like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. It's an overused word. Can you imagine being in a position where you love the public, you serve the public, you appreciate the public, you love the Constitution, but then the actions of a few soil you across the nation, and now you feel like everybody looks at you like you're garbage? It is The squad car is a petri dish for depression, for lack of an outlet, for lack of communication. No, cops do not wind up dealing with the trauma they deal with on work. Still to this day, they don't do it. It's a stigma. You're not going to wind up saying, hey, that dead kid messed me up. I need to talk to somebody about it, because you're going to be feared for having your badge and your gun taken away. I don't care who says what. So the easiest, it's like electricity or water, right? The path of least resistance. That first asshole teen you come across with, the first person who mouths off to you, you're going to wind up flexing that little bit of authority you got, which could do exactly what happened with that kid in that shooting. The cop escalated the situation. The kid acted naturally, fight or flight, fled, and then the cop had to respond to a mess he created. So a lot of police circumstances are perpetuated by their own initiation.
What do you think the gut reaction of most police officers is when they see that video? Just like in general, like if you're right, like there's got to be cops who come into work that day and talk about what they saw. What do you think the reaction is in most?
Sadly, it's 50-50. And look at those stupid ass police forums. How many I can't tell you today how many cops will still argue with me. Oh, we need to see the totality of the circumstances first. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? There's nothing cut and dry. I went through the Derek Chauvin, George Floyd circumstance, and I have never waived my stance. Derek Chauvin, he may not have killed George Floyd, but he did far worse. He punished George Floyd. It's not the job of the police to punish, right? I can't tell you how much garbage I took by cops who defended what he did. And there's still cops who will defend what this cop, the Texas cop did. Most cops, they can't get that past that mentality of critiquing, which they should. If you've done the job for any considerable length of time, you should look and say, all right, yeah, I'm not pleased with what I saw there. And in that circumstance too, because so many people just don't know this, use of force is in the moment. That kid could have blown up a nursing home or set a daycare on fire 5 minutes before that cop got there. But based on the totality of the circumstances in that moment, the cop could not have used deadly force because the kid was not wasn't acting in a way that required deadly force. So it's 50-50. Most cops, they're going to be either it's black or white, either they support or condemn, but the condemnation is far less than the support is.
I mean, luckily, I would say on my end, like my friends who are police officers, I have a bunch. They do hate seeing this kind of stuff. They think it tarnishes their view, like their image. They hate that police officer now represents them. I'm sure there are police officers for sure that are out there, and I think they for sure know it's wrong what happened, but they're not. They are hyper defensive at this point and want to not criticize anything and say, no, I'm going to defend. Oddly enough, that kind of defense, the kind of defense you're talking about, I do not see from police officers as much. I see it from supporters of police officers. Yes. Like I support police officers, but I'm also critical in situations like this to say this is wrong. The George Floyd thing for me, when I watched it, was extremely disturbing because you know what I mean? And regardless of the fentanyl, I do believe also, I'm on the same page as you. I believe he would have died either way. I also don't believe in martyring people who are not necessarily good people. Right. So George Floyd, I don't believe was necessarily a good person. That doesn't mean that it was okay for that to happen. So there's so much nuance in all these things. We've become a very black and white society, right? It's either good or it's bad. It's like, no, George Floyd could have been not a good person. We shouldn't be celebrating his life. Chauvin could have done something terrible in that moment. We shouldn't be defending him. And it could also be that it was completely wrong, but it wasn't the cause of death for him. But it doesn't mean that there shouldn't be some major punishment for Chauvin for what he did. It's nuance. I don't know why we've lost that. I feel like we've lost that in conversations with police, especially. We've lost it across the board with everything. It's just kind of how politics has evolved. Mm-hmm. But at this point, supporting the police, because I've been very public with it, you get accused of being a white supremacist. I'm an Iraqi Jew being accused of being a white supremacist. You know what I mean? It's the weirdest situation in the world. But you can't say anything without being accused of being a white supremacist. And then that also in me, to some extent, makes me want to counter with that kind of defense that you were just mentioning is not healthy, right? You're saying, but I get that urge even because I'm like, what are these idiots talking about? I'm actually bringing nuance to a conversation. So we've been pushed into these kind of corners. It's very weird. And again, I think it contributes more to these bad interactions with law enforcement and civilians where both sides don't know how to interact with each other.
100%.
I saw a video. I mean, have you seen Cops and Robbers on Netflix?
No, I haven't.
Paints police officers as white supremacists who are killing kids. I mean, it's just on the daily, and the guy in it is talking about how he just wants to be able to go out and walk the street and his daughter not be shot and killed. They literally show police turning into Ku Klux Klan members. I'm like, that is not helping anyone, and that's celebrated on one side. The extreme nature of all of this is, and then we have cases like this where we should all just be able to be in agreement, saying like, hey, something bad happened, let's look at it, let's see how we can fix it, and then have actually solution-based conversations, which is what you just offered. A very good.
No, the biggest thing is there's not going to be solution because there's no money in it. The solution is all the money is always in treating the problem. Well, if you get rid of a problem, create a solution, there's no money anymore. And even law enforcement's a business.
Yep. It's very, very sad. Man, I'd like to have you on more often. If
you'd like
to be on the podcast. Where can people find you, by the way? I know you have a couple podcasts.
I'm all over the place. You can go to Dominick Izzo. I'm all over DOMINICKIZZO. I have a ton of content out there, all the way ranging from podcasts to live shows to law enforcement content, fitness, martial arts, you name it.
Okay. Well, like I said, the brand Egard loves getting police officers on, giving their perspective, retired police officer, active duty, it doesn't matter. And just having conversations about these tough things in a way that you can actually kind of get a good message out, which is exactly what you did. So I appreciate it. And hopefully we'll have you back on soon.
Anytime.
Thanks so much.